All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Heather Blakeman. I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. And today we are joined by John Navarro of ODNR, the Division of Wildlife. We will be having a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have any questions, you can use the question area to type it in during the presentation while it's going. If we don't get to all the questions, I end up usually emailing the rest out to the presenter to hopefully get some answers, and then I will follow, when I do a follow-up email, I will send the answers out to all the participants. And just FYI, this webinar is being recorded and you can rewatch it at Chagrin River Watershed Partners YouTube channel, where you can also check out past virtual speaker series. All right, John, you can
Great.
go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction.
No problem.
Yeah, this is John Navarro with the ODNR Division of Wildlife, and today, or actually tonight, it's a celebration, and it's not a celebration of Valentine's Day, but Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. And it's not a celebration of this, although this event on the Cuyahoga River was the impetus for what I am celebrating, which is the Clean Water Act. The Cuyahoga River burned numerous times, and for some reason, it caught national attention in the late 60s, and that's when the Clean Water Act came about. It's interesting that a lot of times people are very reactionary. You need to bite them in the ass before they'll take action, and this was the biting in the ass for the Clean Water Act. I do find it ironic that if a body of water is on fire, you use water to put it out. It's kind of a strange thing. So my presentation today, I want to talk about the Clean Water Act. I want to talk about some of the critters that have benefited. And then I have a few other odds and ends that I want to talk about that are benefiting water quality in Ohio. So like I said, the Cuyahoga River catching on fire really was the impetus for the Clean Water Act. It made it into Time magazine, captured national attention. But like I said, it had burned numerous times. That's why they have fire boats to put out the fires. And even the mayor called it out. He said, we have an open sewer in the center of our city. So everybody was aware of it. And it took that one event to get everybody together. So the Clean Water Act was passed under the Nixon administration. He did veto it, but there was enough support within Congress to override the veto, which takes a lot of people to do that. So obviously, everybody was on board, and I think President Nixon even supported it at the end. Another good thing that came out of it is a really good pale ale called Burning River from Great Lakes Brewing Company. I've had a couple; they're pretty good. So a couple benefits from the river on fire. But really, the Clean Water Act, it's celebrating its 50-year anniversary, and it's just I can't trumpet enough how great this act legislation was. So the big three things that came out of it were a basic structure for regulating point source pollution. And the one I want to talk about a little bit more is the construction of wastewater treatment plants. And then a little bit on non-point source pollution, which really isn't the strength of the Clean Water Act. But before the Clean Water Act, everything was dumped into rivers. They were really treated poorly. You wouldn't put your restaurant overlooking the river. You put it on the other side of the building. Rivers were the things behind the business where you dumped all your junk. So really, in 50 years, quite the turnaround. But wastewater treatment plants, unbelievable what they have done. I consider them unsung heroes because before that, sewage, untreated sewage was going into our waterways. Now it's much better. This is a picture of the southerly wastewater treatment plant south of Columbus. This is probably the one I'm connected to in Columbus here. And that picture with the guy standing there, that's the water coming from the treatment plant, which is actually clearer than the water in the Scioto River where it's going. And at this point, I think the Scioto River equals what is coming out of the treatment plant. So it really is augmenting the flow of the river. And then the water is in much better shape than it was when it came in. And to the point of where the Scioto River at this location is verging on attaining exceptional warm water quality as seen by the Ohio EPA. So quite the phenomenon there. So for the Cuyahoga River, the future really does look bright from what it was 50 years ago. But like I said before, you wouldn't be doing this in the Cuyahoga River. You'd be crazy. But now it's become a very popular recreation spot. A lot of kayaking, boat tours. I've been up in Cleveland numerous times, and there's restaurants where you can eat overlooking the water. So quite the change in attitude towards this river body since it's been cleaned up. Another interesting thing is we are doing a lake sturgeon restoration project with numerous partners on the Maumee River. We're 3 to 4 years into it, releasing 3,000 lake sturgeon a year into the Maumee River, and this will be a 20-year effort. And it's to reinvigorate that river, which used to support lake sturgeon, and so we're trying to bring them back. The really good partner here is the Toledo Zoo. They have a rearing facility close to this location where they release the sturgeon in the Maumee River in October. And zoos are really good at outreach. So these events for releasing these fish have become quite the event. They have a steel drum band, they have a bunch of vendors, food trucks, and you can sponsor a fish, which means that each of them has a pit tag in it. So you can use a piece of equipment to wand a fish if you catch it, and you'll get that unique code like you can see in this picture here. This one was caught by a commercial fisherman in his net. They have the wands for reading pit tags. So they'll report it with the size and everything in a picture, and then they'll release it alive. So quite the event. Thanks to Toledo Zoo for really making this a big splash every year. I recommend attending if you can. But we're right at the tail end of looking at the habitat in the Cuyahoga River, making sure there's sufficient spawning habitat for lake sturgeon, so when they come back, there's the right substrate for successful reproduction. And I think we're probably within 2 to 3 years of possibly implementing a lake sturgeon restoration project in the Cuyahoga River, which is a mind blower when you think of what it was 50 years ago. And now we're going to put a state threatened species in there. Another thing that came out of this was 2 years ago, one of the local breweries actually did a batch of Sturgeon IPA and was selling it there. This is a picture of the can. So I love microbrews. They're very versatile, and they have a real sense of community sometimes. And so pretty cool that they put this small batch together for that event. There's also talk about stocking lake sturgeon. I'm sorry, for steelhead trout. It's a recreational species that a lot of people fish for. It's very popular up on Lake Erie, in the lake proper, and then in the tributaries when they come in to spawn, although they really aren't successful spawners in our tributaries, but they do go through all the rigmarole that other trout do to spawn. So what we're talking about is redistributing the allocation we get. We stock 450,000 steelhead trout a year in several tributaries shown here. And we're talking about maybe allocating some to the Cuyahoga River and trying to generate a fishery there. That's a couple years out also from making that decision. I'm a big fan of dam removals. It's amazing what you can do with a track hoe and a 55-gallon drum of diesel fuel. You knock these things out and the recovery is almost immediate once you get this big piece of concrete out that really shouldn't be there. In the Cuyahoga River, a lot of groups have been removing dams. The last big one is the one shown here. The bigger picture is the Gorge Dam. Pretty significant structure. There's a lot of talk about removing this dam. The real holdup was there's contaminated sediment behind the dam that needs to be dredged and disposed of properly. And you add that to a dam removal and you're 10xing the cost of a removal. Well, thanks to a settlement with Monsanto over PCB contamination, there was a settlement when Governor DeWine was the Attorney General. Lots of money came in for restoration and helping the environment. And so he was able to allocate the money needed for the non-federal match for a federal grant to remove this dam. So all the funding's in place, and I would expect this thing will be removed in the next 2 to 3 years. And once that's removed, man, the Cuyahoga's free flowing for quite a ways, and the recovery to the aquatic system will be great because the habitat behind these dams is not what stream fish really want. So you take these things out and recovery will be relatively quick. And it's just not the Cuyahoga River that's benefiting, it's a statewide thing. We've had a couple things here in Columbus. We had a couple dams removed on the Olentangy, and then here on the main stem of the Scioto River in downtown Columbus. The dam was real close to Cosi, if you've ever been there. And when the Main Street Dam was removed, you remove those dams and the water level drops back to what it should be, like a normal river. And that really opens up that riparian corridor for either planting of trees. What Columbus did is they call it the Scioto Mile, and it's just become a hotbed for walking, fishing. You can rent kayaks. So a real gem for downtown Columbus. The other picture is Creekside in Gahanna. They've really embraced Big Walnut Creek, which flows through Gahanna, and they have a lot of trails that walk around it. You can actually rent kayaks here too to get yourself on the water. So it's really great that cities are embracing rivers as opposed to using them for disposal of their sewage. So I want to talk about some of the species that have recovered. 3 of them here, and I'll talk about them in detail more, but the longhead darter is one that really has recovered mainly because the Clean Water Act. Alligator gar and black-nosed shiner are ones that we're bringing back through repatriation efforts. One story that might be of interest for you folks up in Northeast Ohio is brook trout's not doing so good. If you knew the story about brook trout, they did find a remnant population of the original strain of brook trout from way back when settlers showed up and Native Americans were around, and we did a lot of effort to bring them back, and we thought we were in really good shape, but we're starting to see that habitat loss is really hurting this species. We're getting these extreme rain events that are really blowing out the habitat they need. So a lot of work to restore habitat and try to maintain this native brook trout population. So we have a lot of people working on it, and more to come on that one. We're not giving up. So I'm going to go through 3 species of darters that have really recovered because of the Clean Water Act. One of my favorites is the blue breast darter. This is one that was kind of hiding out in higher quality rivers. Usually the darbies seem to be a refugia from poor water quality. So a lot of the rare fish were hanging out in the darbies. And when the Scioto River cleaned up and our other tributaries, these things started moving out on their own. So you can see the black spots was the older distribution of blue breast darters, but you can see the red dots where their population has just exploded. And nothing that anybody did except the Clean Water Act, cleaning up the systems. The Scioto River, like I said, is reaching exceptional warm water quality status. So, you know, they stick their head out of the Darby and they see it's not so bad, and they've just been really exploding. And I find it interesting that the Ohio River population has really exploded. You can see those dots along the upper Ohio River, that they're just really plentiful up there. So a really great story. We're also working through OSU, through the Ohio Biodiversity Conservation Partnership. The main partner is Brian Zimmerman. He's probably the best ichthyologist, fish person in the state. He actually co-authored the Naturalist Guide to the Fishes of Ohio with Dan Rice, who used to work for the ODNR Natural Areas and Preserves. And a great book. I highly recommend buying it. You can get it through the Ohio Biological Survey. Just go to their website, and it's a phenomenal resource for all the native fish in Ohio. But you can see from this that, you know, when he started relocating fish, so he's moving them from healthy populations to where there's no fish. You can see originally you're getting a lot of, you know, captures that were tagged. All these fish have a elastomer tag in it. It's kind of like a dye that goes under the skin. So he can tell which ones he stocked and which ones are natural recruits. And you can see down in 2021, he's really catching mostly natural recruits when he's out there sampling. So I think this one, we're probably going to walk away from this one and consider it self-sustaining. Tippy Canoe, this one's a really cool darter. It's one of the smaller ones. This one, the back to the blue breast, that one is no longer listed. It's a delisted species because it's so common. Tippy Canoe used to be endangered, but it's now downlisted to a species of concern. So dropping down there to the point of where we're probably going to delist it soon. But the same story, just exploded, not as much as the blue breast, but you can see the red dots really exploding and expanding their range. And this is all on their own. This has nothing to do with efforts we're doing. But like with blue breast, we're also doing some relocations, translocations in spots really where they can't get to, mainly because of dams. But so this is a Tippy Canoe. You can see it's pretty small size. You can see that elastomer tag right in the middle of the body. And same story in 2022 when Brian was going out, he's getting a lot of natural recruits. A majority of them are natural recruits. So this is another one we're probably 1 year away from considering that self-sustaining. The last darter I'm going to talk about is a pretty cool one, is the longhead darter. This was extirpated from Ohio, meaning not in Ohio, but elsewhere in the United States. And our folks from District 3, our Akron office, were out doing sampling. I think they were looking for sauger in the Ohio River, and they came across two of these small darters, and they didn't recognize them. So they took pictures, sent them to Brian Zimmerman, and Brian's like, "Oh, holy cow, that's a longhead darter. That's the first occurrence of that species in Ohio for a long, long time." This one's an interesting one because it's not coming from a place in Ohio. It's coming from the Allegheny River and then coming down through the Ohio River and then getting into Ohio. So a pretty cool story. The Allegheny River, it's quite the gem. It has a lot of listed mussels and listed fish. So really good system, and hopefully it stays that way. But we're translocating longhead darters with partnership with Pennsylvania Boat and Fish Commission. Same thing, we're putting them in the upper Muskingum because they can't get there on their own. This one, it's not as dramatic on the recovery, and we're probably going to keep at this one for a while. But one thing is, these things are really hard to catch. They really don't hang out in the riffles where you're able to catch them with seines. They're more of an open pool species and runs, harder to get your hands on, but really cool fish. And so making a comeback. Thank you, Clean Water Act. This is one of my favorite critters getting away from fish, the eastern hellbender. It's a state endangered amphibian, the largest one in Ohio. It's solely aquatic. It does not leave the water. And this one's cool. It's different from the mud puppy. The mud puppy has actual gills. The eastern hellbender, it starts out with gills, but then those things go away, and this thing breathes through its skin. So hence the folds and a lot of surface area. So it actually breathes through the skin and really needs a good water quality. So I'm thinking about coming up with a hat. I'm going to see how it works, but we've been working really hard to make hellbenders great again. So this hat will be coming out soon. But this has been a phenomenal partnership. It's been going on for 10 years now. It's called the Ohio Hellbender Partnership. A lot of partners, some of them listed here, but there's a lot more not on this slide. So the hellbenders mostly southeast Ohio, mostly that unglaciated part of Ohio. They do like clean water and they like big rocks. They spend most of their life under a rock and might stay under the same rock their whole life. Don't move a lot. But we're working with many partners and a lot of work through Greg Lips, who's with OSU. And what we're doing is we're collecting eggs from the wild. So we're able to find nests, and we're able to take those eggs and bring them into the zoos. And also working with Penta Career Center, which is a high school vocational school up in Toledo. They have a program. And what we do is we, as in the partnership, is they raise those till they're 3 years old, and then they're large enough to be released into the wild where they're not as susceptible to predation. But it takes a lot of effort to raise those things to 3 years old, because as they get older, they don't like each other. So you got to make more space for them. So to date, just to go back, there is an 80% decline in hellbenders in their native range, and that's Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Indiana, North Carolina mainly. But across its range, it's really dropped off. So trying to bring them back to date, over 1,600 have been released at 26 sites and 10 watersheds. So a lot of effort in 10 years to bring these critters back. So like I said, we've been at it for 10 years. So they should start reaching sexual maturity and reproducing on their own. So we're going to start doing a pretty intensive assessment on our success for the past 10 years. And the idea is we don't want to keep stocking them forever or releasing them forever. The idea is to develop multiple self-sustaining populations and then be able to walk away. So we do get a lot of over 90% of Ohio is in private land ownership. So you can't do much in rivers and streams without working with private landowners. And we've had a lot of landowners really embrace the hellbender efforts, and they're really a steward of their river system, and they really keep an eye out for these things, and will chase people off that might be trying to harm them. So pretty cool. One of the events we had, a lady baked this cake for the Hellbender release. I find it interesting that one of the critters she put on the cake is a raccoon. Our initial release we had a real problem with raccoon predation. So hence that's why we want them to be older, and they're really susceptible in that first week or so after release before they'd find a comfortable spot to hide. And I love that picture of a baby hellbender in an egg. Really adorable. I like the picture of how many people does it take to release a hellbender, and I think my count is about 20 people, but a lot of local landowners came out for this release event. So this is the director of ODNR, Mary Mertz, and Kent Becker with the Toledo Zoo. He's one of the people that helps us raise these things for release. And this is not them getting arrested for poaching hellbenders. That's our wildlife officer out there. He's bringing a hellbender out there to the director, and each of the hellbenders is individually placed under a rock, and hopefully they stay there because there's safety in that under that rock. So we had both the director out there having a blast, and Chief Kendra Wecker for the Division of Wildlife was out there, and it's really cool when you can get your administration out there and interested. So this is not a hellbender coffin. This is actually an initiative we have. This is Hellbender Habitat. So like I said, hellbenders need, they like large rocks to hide under, but a lot of places don't have enough of that type of habitat. So this is something a lot of states have been working with. They're called hellbender huts, and they mimic what hellbenders like. And what they like is they want a single opening that they can guard, and then they like a cavity where they can lay their eggs and hang out. So this mimics that. It's shown some success. We've put a lot of them out. And when we go in to monitor them, we've gotten eggs out of them. There's adults in them. The cool thing is that you can see that top. You can pop that thing off and you can do what you need. You can get the hellbender out and do measurements, see if it has a pit tag, or you can harvest eggs, or you can just leave them alone. So these things are pretty cool, and they've become pretty prevalent. And yeah, there's a beer for that too. So on to the plight of freshwater mussels. I'm a big fan of freshwater mussels. I find them fascinating. The problem is only about 30% of the population is stable. And if you do the math, that means about 70% are in some form of protection or extirpated or extinct. So this freshwater mussels have really taken it on the chin. So we're doing a lot of efforts to reverse that decline. One thing that was done a while back was both through administrative code, which is rule, rule, or ORC, which is law. So ORC law it doesn't get any bigger than that. You can't break the law. It's a pretty big deal that protecting mussels is written into law, but it's also written into administrative code also. And basically it says you are not allowed to possess freshwater mussels or the shells. And that comes down to, they used to be a big poaching issue with mussels because they were used for the oyster industry over in Asia. So they would use the shells, and they would break them up, and they would put them in an oyster. And what an oyster would do is, that's an irritant. So they would put the coating around it, which ends up being a pearl. So we did have some cases of poaching way back when. I think people have gotten the hint that you're going to get in big trouble if you harm these things. I love this picture here. This is I can't remember what species this is. Sorry, I got to turn off my furnace is kicking on. I'm relegated to the basement of my house. But this is a mussel displaying. This one's ready to release the Glaucidia, which are young mussels. And they do all kinds of tricky things to get fish to come close to them. So this one, this will flick around. It looks like a fish. A fish will come up to it like a bass or some other fish and think it's something to eat, take a bite at it, and it will get infected with Glaucidia. And infected sounds bad, but it's just the Glaucidia. They hang on to the fish, and they use the fish as a host, and then they'll drop off after a week or two. And most people think that's a distribution mechanism, because mussels don't move very far. So the best way to move your young around is attach it to something that does move. So probably a mechanism for distribution, but just a fascinating adaptation that they have for their life cycle. So like I said, they do need a fish host. One thing we are working on at a facility at the Columbus Zoo is bypassing the fish host by using an auger solution in a lab. So that we put the Glaucidia in this solution in a petri dish, you put it in an incubator, and voila, you'll get the juvenile. They'll transform into a juvenile mussel without needing the fish host. And this is cool because you can really make a lot of mussels this way by having to go through the infection route. And this will be a game changer for making a lot of mussels for repatriation efforts. The other thing that OSU is doing is trying to figure out how mussels tick health-wise, because you can't tell if a mussel is happy or sad. Usually you find out it's sad is when it dies and the shell opens. So a lot of work's been done on looking at the blood of mussels and looking at what makes a happy mussel and what makes a sad mussel. And that's really important when it comes to our conservation efforts. So I mentioned that Monsanto settlement for PCBs. A lot of money came into Ohio. The ODNR got $750,000 right out of the gate. And the director, who's on the left, thought it would be cool to give $500,000 to the Columbus Zoo for both mussels and amphibians and reptile conservation. You can see Chief Kendra Recker on the one side, and that's the CEO director from the Columbus Zoo there. And so he did not know he was getting this check, so he was quite pleased. And so I'll show you here in a minute what we're going to be doing with that money. And I'll talk about the fish guide in a minute, because we're going to be using money to redo that guide. So we do have a mussel research facility, and I know it looks like a house. It was actually the clubhouse for the Jeffrey Industries. It's on the O'Shaughnessy Reservoir across the river from the Columbus Zoo. They donated it to the city of Columbus, and the Columbus Zoo leases this building from the city of Columbus. And in there is our mussel research facility. It's showing its age. It's having a lot of issues. So the rendering on the right is what we're looking to do, which is a whole redo of the outside structure to make sure it's safe. And then we're going to be working on the inside to redo the in vitro room for making more mussels. So we're going to rededicate the facility in the fall. And there was a debate on should it be the Hanna Aquatic Conservation Center after Jack Hanna, or the Waters Conservation Center. We're going to go with the WAC. Tom Waters, he passed away from cancer a couple years ago. He was the driving force behind mussel conservation in Ohio. He was the driving force behind the Freshwater Mussel Conservation Facility. So in memory of Tom, it's only right to make it under his name. And I think he had a really good sense of humor, and I think you get a kick out of it being called the WAC. So the Waters Aquatic Conservation Center. There wasn't a beer for mussels, so I made my own. So I mentioned the Ohio Stream Guide. This was done 23 years ago through the Ohio chapter of the American Fisheries Society by Randy Sanders, and the guy that did all the graphics was Ronald Zimmerman. But this thing needs a refresh. This is a very popular guide, and it goes through all the components of streams and the critters and the geology, stream laws and all that. but it needs a major redo. And we're looking at using those Monsanto funds to do a reboot of this guide and really get it out into people's hands. And we'd also have a web-enabled version of this. I did mention non-point source pollution. This is probably the #1 pollutant right now. It's a real problem because sedimentation is probably, I would say, the #1 pollutant right now in our rivers, streams, and our lakes. And we really need to get a grasp on keeping the soil on the landscape as opposed to washing off into our rivers and streams. It's real bad for streams in that it coats the bottom of the rivers, which kind of suffocates the bottom, and that's where you get that's where all the action is. That's where all your invertebrates are, which are important food sources and all that. So really need to get a handle on non-point source pollution. And one thing that's really heading in that direction is Governor DeWine's H2 Ohio initiative. And this is big money, millions and millions of dollars going towards creating wetlands and restoring streams and rivers to improve water quality. So 3 organizations are involved with this: Ohio Department of Agriculture, Ohio EPA, and then Ohio DNR. I have 10 projects I'm managing right now, H2 Ohio projects. And I love the quote up there is, he's really going to the source of the problem, which is in the watershed. And he's really putting the money needed. We're several years into it. He's in his last term. He can only have 2. So we got 4 more years of H2 Ohio. So I'm hoping that'll have enough momentum that this will become just regular business, and that we'll keep working on creating wetlands to help water quality, because wetlands are critical for filtering out pollutants and sediment before they go in rivers and streams. And it's not going to take DeWine's term to fix it. We really need to keep going for a long-term fix on this. These numbers are mind-blowing. 115 projects so far, over $100 million spent. I love the threatened and endangered species that have benefited, which is both terrestrial birds, turtles, amphibians, and also fish, and everything else that benefits from wetlands. So just really mind-blowing how much money and how much effort is going into this. And I just want to touch on a couple of the projects. This shows a map of the 115 projects that have been done so far. The initiative was really focused on Northwest Ohio, mainly to help the Maumee River. If people remember, the city of Toledo had to turn off their drinking water source because of harmful algal blooms. They're a real problem for Lake Erie. So the governor really wanted to hit it hard in Northwest Ohio, but it's expanded to the central basin of Lake Erie, as you can see. And then a couple years ago, he opened it up to the Ohio River watershed. So there's a sprinkling of them in there. But really, we have a need for Southwest Ohio. The one project in Athens is on the Hocking River. That's one of the ones I'm managing. So, but 4 more years of this map is just going to get filled up. Really awesome stuff. This is one project that just finished in the city of Lorraine. You can see Lake Erie in the background there. This is in the city proper, so 20 acres in the city limits is pretty hard to do. And you can see from that aerial, they re-meandered the stream through the restoration area, and then you can see all those wetlands that are created. So when the stream hits peak flow or flood flows, those waters will go out into those wetlands and then slowly filter back into the groundwater. And just it works as nature's kidney for cleaning up the water. And you can see that shot of the stream, really good habitat there. This is a cool one. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Chippewa Lake. It had an old amusement park there. You can see the defunct Ferris wheel there. I've given this presentation, and actually people in the audience had gone there as a kid and remember riding this. So the amusement park's long gone. It's like a scene out of The Walking Dead. But this is going to be all restored by Medina County Park District. They've been a really great partner. What's cool is they're going to create a lot of wetlands, but they're going to keep the integrity of the amusement park by taking these rides and putting them in another part of the park so people can reminisce about the old days of visiting the lake. This is my favorite ride. Imagine the kid coming around the turn there and seeing this tree. It's amazing how nature will take over if you walk away from it. Just like the National Geographic show that I've watched numerous times. If man disappeared, it wouldn't take long for nature to retake it. So really cool project. Looking forward to that one finishing up. So I just want to finish up with 2 more slides. This is actually one individual's idea of stream bank restoration on the Cuyahoga River. That's all been taken out and restored, but that's kind of how people felt about rivers back then. So there was some talk about reversing some of the protections of the Clean Water Act and what's considered waters of the U.S. There was going to be an effort to take away protections for headwater streams or intermittent streams. It sounds like that's going to be reversed, and those headwater streams will be protected. And most of you know that water flows downstream. If you muck up the headwater, you're going to muck up the rest of it. So really need to protect those headwaters. They're critically important. So we'll see how that goes, but it looks like it's trending in the right direction. And then the last thing I want to talk about is there was an effort in a national effort called Recovery of America's Wildlife Act. And this was going to be an effort to provide funding for diversity for critters that aren't hunted or fished, because there are funding sources for those critters. But really, the funding for rare animals really isn't what it should be. And this RAWA would have brought in $1.3 million a year for what we call species of greatest conservation need, or our rare critters. And they had to come up with a pay for, which means no new taxes. It was a tax loophole that they were going to close, which was going to generate the money. But it was going to be $20 million a year for Ohio for species of greatest conservation need. And to put it in perspective, we get $1.2 million right now for that. So, 10x what we have now for. So it was close. I can't remember. I think it passed the House, but not the Senate. They tried to scramble at the end to get it into a bill at the end, and it just didn't make it. So we were so close to really providing the money needed for rare critters. So we're kind of back to square one. There's new people in the House and Senate, so there's some re-education we need to do, but it's not from ground zero. But boy, it was really disappointing. We were so close to getting funding that was really needed. So with that, I just want to keep the momentum going. I think I might have a beer after this presentation. It just seems right. But with that, I will take any questions. I'm just happy with the direction it's going, and I'm hoping we don't backslide, because we've seen a lot of improvements in water quality. So with that, I'll stop talking. I'll take questions.
All righty, let's see. Does anyone have any questions? Because right now my question box is empty.
Oh no.
I know, but I guess I could ask some questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So I guess probably a question that everybody's been thinking about is like, how much issues do you think we're going to get from the train derailment?
Well, it's funny you say that. I just listened to the governor's, he did a news item on the what do we call it? A news event, and I
Okay.
listened to it. I actually watched it. It was live, and the jury's out. So when that initially happened, we really couldn't put people out there to assess the damage because
Mm-hmm.
these were toxic chemicals, and we didn't want our staff running around when it's a human health hazard.
Yeah.
There was a fish kill. It's a shame that these things happen to systems that I dearly love. It's Little Beaver Creek in Columbiana County. It's a true gem. It's and
It is
actually,
beautiful.
yeah, it's a scenic river. I love it. I've kayaked it. One I want to keep a high quality. So it's not that this should happen anywhere else, but why did it have to happen on one of our highest quality streams? But it sounds like they reacted very quickly, were able to contain a lot of it. It didn't go directly into Little Beaver. It went into some tributaries. I'm hoping that by the time it got to Little Beaver, that it wasn't the pollutant impact that it could have been. Um, I think it's they call them volatile organic compounds, meaning when they hit air, they usually volatilize, so leave. So I'm hoping Little Beaver Creek will be okay, but time will tell. But Little Beaver is one of the places we go to harvest eggs. It's one of the handful of streams that we have hellbender reproduction because it's such high quality. So crossing my fingers, hoping for the best.
Alrighty, I have some other questions now. I'm just trying to. All right. Trying to figure out how to make my question thing bigger, but all right. This person says, I thought in Ohio a House bill was passed to remove protection on ephemeral streams.
Yeah,
Has that been overturned?
no, I know what you're talking about. So that's Ohio legislation. The what I was talking about before
Mm,
was
okay.
federal for waters of the U.S. I think the EPA still has the ability to provide protections. Um, I just don't have the details on that. I was disappointed when I heard they were trying to remove protections for ephemeral streams. Those are critically important for water quality because everything goes downstream. But I don't know where that is right now, to be honest with you.
Okay. Alrighty. Trying to see if there's another one. All right, somebody just says, thank you so much for the program. It was very encouraging. And was the fish kill of sensitive species or of the very tolerable species?
So I
Just
saw,
wondering how bad to gauge it.
yeah, I saw a preliminary list, and there was nothing from threatened endangered list. It was all pretty common stuff. So some of the more common minnows, white sucker, hog nose sucker, some of the more common darters. So I looked at the list real quick and didn't see anything jumping out as super rare.
And this person wants to know if you know of any volunteer opportunities for residents in Lake County. I'm guessing for ODNR.
Yeah, well, actually, Lake County has a very active park district. I
Yes.
work with them a lot. I would suggest calling Lake County Park District. I guarantee you they have volunteer efforts and a really good group of people. I've worked with them on quite a few things. So yeah, I call your local park district.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure not only that, I mean, there's Holden out that way. I know occasionally CRWP, we do some volunteer stuff. So there's lots of things out there.
Sure.
Let's see if there's anybody added anything else that I might have missed. Nope, it looks like everything. But yeah, I last year actually was very lucky to go down to Columbiana County and see some of it, which I've never been down that way, but it was beautiful. So it's a
Yeah,
shame.
we actually, Scenic Rivers hosted an event down there with the director. And I was really worried because the whole drive over there, it was raining and every other stream I saw was high and muddy. It was amazing when you got to Little Beaver, the watershed so intact that it was still crystal clear. And what was great at the end of the float, a bald eagle flew over, um, and that really got the director's attention. So yeah, let's cross our fingers and hope Little Beaver's doing okay.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I'm really looking forward to maybe going trying to release some lake sturgeon in the Cuyahoga. That's exciting.
I tell you, that would be a huge event because yeah, what quite the turnaround. So we'll probably be working with Cleveland Metro Parks on that one. They've got a lot of we work with them a lot on with stuff, and they have a huge presence in that area. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it is really sad to hear about the brook trout, though. I live in Geauga County, so I know very
Yeah, I
well about
know.
the brook trout.
Yeah,
So,
so we do have a Brook Trout Advisory Committee. We're working on a strategic plan on how to move forward. Working with Geauga County Park District, Cleveland Metro Parks. I know Chagrin River, you have a representative on there.
yep.
So yeah, and we're working to put together a plan, and it's really about making these streams more less susceptible to heavy rain flows because I'm seeing it in my own yard where we're getting such heavy rains. I'm having a little stream go through my side yard to the front, and that
Oh,
wasn't there when I moved in. So we really need to make these things more resilient.
oh, I hear you. And the whole time that I've owned my house, it never flooded until
Yeah,
like 7 years ago, and it's because our sewer system can't handle it. So,
yeah. I've just noticed in the past 5 years, I'm getting a lot of more standing water in my yard, which I never
yep,
had before. So,
no fun. All right, just double checking to make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions. It doesn't look like it.
well,
If
great. Well,
you, so
appreciate the
we end
opportunity
early.
and yeah, and happy Valentine's Day to
Oh,
everybody out there.
yes.
I got to
And
go up and hug my wife and daughter.
yeah, and go
I didn't
enjoy a
get to see
beer,
them when
right?
I got home. So, well,
All
thank you
right.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody.